The U.S. horizon drifted silently through the obsidian vastness of deep space, its sensors probing the infinite darkness. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the observation deck, her dark eyes reflecting the countless pinpricks of distant starlight. At 42, she was a veteran of space exploration, her career spanning 2 decades of increasingly ambitious missions. This expedition was supposed to be different. A comprehensive survey of uncharted regions beyond the solar system's traditional exploration zones. Her team was an eclectic mix of brilliance and determination. To her left, Dr. Amir Khan monitored the spectral analysis systems, his fingers dancing across holographic displays with practiced precision. To her right, Lieutenant Sarah Chen maintained a vigilant watch on the ship's defensive systems, her military training a constant undercurrent of preparedness. The first indication of something extraordinary came as a subtle disruption in the quantum entanglement communication array. A microsecond of interference, so brief that most systems would have dismissed it as statistical noise. But Elena was not most scientists. "Amir," she called softly, "run a diagnostic on the quantum comm array. Something feels off." Before he could respond, space itself seemed to tear open. It was not the gentle transition of a standard hyperspace jump, but a violent rupture that defied everything they understood about spatial mechanics. A massive vessel materialized, its design so alien, so impossibly geometric that it seemed to challenge the very concept of 3-dimensional existence. The U.S. horizon's communication systems crackled to life, but what emerged was not sound in any traditional sense. It was a direct neural transmission. A communication method so advanced it bypassed traditional audio and visual interfaces, instead projecting directly into the minds of the crew. Biological unit designation, human collective. The transmission began, its tone devoid of any recognizable emotion. Your spatial coordinates have transgressed Zornak collective territorial boundaries. Immediate compliance with extraction and classification protocols is mandatory. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. The message was not a request. It was a cold, calculated statement of absolute authority. Lieutenant Chen's hands were already moving, preparing defensive protocols. But Elena raised a hand, signaling caution. Years of diplomatic training had taught her that first contact scenarios were delicate, unpredictable ecosystems of potential misunderstanding. "This is Dr. Elena Rodriguez of the United Earth Exploration Vessel Horizon," she responded, her voice steady. "We are on a peaceful scientific mission of exploration. We did not intend to violate any territorial boundaries." The response was immediate and chilling. "Intention is irrelevant. Your species is classified as a pre-stellar civilization. Mandatory integration into the collective is now initiated. You have 30 standard cycles to prepare for complete submission." Submission. The word hung in the air like a physical weight. Elena's mind raced. 30 cycles, approximately 45 Earth years, was both an eternity and an instant. The Zornak clearly believed humanity would fracture, submit, or be easily conquered. They had no comprehension of human resilience, of humanity's capacity for rapid adaptation. A smile began to form at the corner of her mouth. The Zornak had just made a fundamental miscalculation. They had viewed humanity as a problem to be solved, a species to be categorized and controlled. They had no idea what was coming. "We do not submit," Elena transmitted back, her words carrying a quiet, steel-edged defiance that would soon echo across every human communication channel. "We adapt." The transmission from the U.S. horizon spread across Earth like wildfire. Within hours, every major government, research institution, and technology center was mobilizing in a way humanity had never seen before. The Zornak's ultimatum had done the impossible. It had unified a planet. In Geneva, the United Nations emergency session looked nothing like its historical counterparts. Gone were the endless debates and bureaucratic posturing. Instead, a war room of the world's most brilliant minds assembled with unprecedented speed and purpose. Dr. Kwame Osei stood at the center of the room, his holographic display showing a complex web of global resources and potential strategies. A Ghanaian quantum physicist with 3 doctoral degrees and a reputation for revolutionary thinking, Osai represented a new breed of global intellectual. To his right, Dr. Yuki Tanaka, a Japanese robotics engineer, manipulated 3-dimensional data streams with an intensity that bordered on artistic. "We're not just preparing for a war," Osai announced to the assembled global leaders, "we're redesigning human potential." The United Earth Defense Initiative, UEDI, was more than a military organization. It was a radical reimagining of human collaboration. Tech giants from Silicon Valley worked alongside industrial complexes in China, research institutions in Europe, and innovation centers in Africa. National boundaries dissolved in the face of an existential threat. Schools transformed overnight. Traditional curricula were replaced with intensive problem-solving programs. Children as young as 10 were being taught advanced strategic thinking, adaptive algorithms, and cross-cultural communication. Every educational system on the planet was retooled with one goal: prepare humanity for survival. In a small laboratory in Sao Paulo, Dr. Maria Rodriguez, Alina's younger sister, led a team developing adaptive learning technologies. Their breakthrough came from an unexpected source: studying how street children in Brazilian favelas solved complex survival problems. "Improvisation is our greatest weapon," she told her team. "The Zornak think in straight lines. We think in spirals." Military protocols underwent a complete overhaul. Traditional hierarchical structures were replaced with fluid, adaptive networks. A soldier in Tokyo could instantaneously coordinate with a researcher in Cape Town, their communication enhanced by AI systems that learned and evolved in real time. The global effort wasn't just technological, it was deeply personal. Families held emergency preparedness meetings. Communities formed support networks. The fear was present, but so was an unprecedented sense of hope and determination. Dr. Amir Khan, who had been on the U.S. horizon during the initial contact, began developing a comprehensive database of the Zornak transmission. Every microsecond of data was analyzed, dissected, understood. What seemed like a threat was now becoming humanity's greatest opportunity for advancement. "They gave us 30 cycles," Khan muttered to himself, a smile playing on his lips. "We'll be ready in 30 months. The most remarkable transformation happened in the human spirit. The Zornak had intended to crush humanity's hope. Instead, they had ignited a global renaissance of collaboration, innovation, and collective potential. In research centers, military bases, schools, and community centers across the planet, a new motto began to emerge, a statement of defiance and hope that would soon echo across the galaxy. "We do not submit. We adapt. We rise." The breakthrough laboratory looked nothing like a traditional research facility. Situated in a converted warehouse on the outskirts of Sydney, it was a chaotic ecosystem of creativity that defied every conventional approach to technological development. Dr. Yuki Tanaka stood at the center of this controlled chaos, her eyes darting between holographic displays and a group of researchers that looked more like a band of misfit geniuses than a scientific team. To her left, Dr. Marcus Chen, a neuroscientist with a background in street performance art, was sketching complex neural network patterns that resembled intricate graffiti. To her right, Arya Chen, a 17-year-old coding prodigy, manipulated quantum algorithms with an intuition that bordered on the supernatural. The team's mission was deceptively simple: develop adaptive nanometamaterials that could fundamentally reshape how technology interacts with its environment. But their approach was anything but conventional. "We're not just creating technology," Marcus explained, his latest sketch revealing a complex neural network that looked more like an abstract painting. "We're teaching materials how to think." Their breakthrough came from an unexpected fusion of disciplines: Yuki's robotics expertise, Marcus's understanding of neuroplasticity, and Arya's revolutionary coding approach created something entirely new. The nanometamaterials they developed were more than just advanced materials. They were living, learning systems. In a demonstration that would be remembered as a turning point in human technological history, Aria wrote a series of adaptive algorithms inspired by her experience with street dance. Just as a dancer responds instantaneously to music and environment, these nanometamaterials could restructure themselves in milliseconds, learning and adapting with each interaction. The first full-scale test was both terrifying and beautiful. A prototype spacecraft component made of the new metamaterial was subjected to a series of extreme conditions: vacuum, radiation, mechanical stress, conditions that would destroy traditional materials. But this material did something extraordinary. It didn't just resist, it learned. When exposed to a simulated asteroid impact, the material didn't just absorb the shock. It analyzed the impact, understood its properties, and restructured itself to not only prevent damage, but to potentially use the energy of the impact for additional propulsion. "It's alive," Yuki whispered, watching the holographic display. Not in the biological sense, but in a way we've never seen before. The implications were staggering. Traditional alien technologies relied on predetermined responses. Zornak ships were designed with specific defensive and offensive capabilities. But these new human materials could change their entire molecular structure in microseconds, adapting to threats in ways that defied traditional understanding of physics and engineering. Aria, the youngest member of the team, understood the deeper significance. "It's not about having the best weapon," she explained during a global broadcast that would become legendary. "It's about being able to become whatever weapon or shield you need to be in that moment." The scientific community was divided. Some called it impossible. Others called it revolutionary. But the military strategists understood immediately. This was a game changer. Dr. Marcus Chen looked at the team, a smile spreading across his face. "The Zornak thinks in straight lines," he said, echoing a sentiment that was becoming humanity's battle cry. "We think in spirals." The age of adaptive technology had begun, and humanity was just getting started. The first wave of Zornak ships materialized at the edge of the solar system like a nightmare given form. Their vessels were perfect geometric constructs, obsidian black monoliths that seemed to absorb light itself, each ship a testament to cold mathematical precision. Captain Marcus Williams stood on the bridge of the U.S. horizon, now transformed from a scientific vessel into humanity's first line of defense. His background as a former emergency room surgeon gave him a unique perspective on combat. Where traditional military strategists saw battles as chess matches, Marcus saw them as living, breathing organisms, each movement a pulse, each decision a potential lifeline. "They're predictable," he said softly to his tactical officer, Lieutenant Sarah Chen. "Every single movement is calculated, predetermined." The Zornak fleet moved in perfect synchronization, their approach a mathematical algorithm of destruction. They expected humanity to respond with traditional military tactics, linear approaches, fixed defensive positions, predictable counterattacks. They were wrong. The first human ships that engaged the Zornak fleet were nothing like traditional spacecraft. Equipped with the adaptive nanometamaterials developed by Yuki Tanaka's team, they moved like living things. Where a Zornak ship would calculate a precise firing solution, the human vessels would ripple and flow, their very molecular structure shifting to redirect energy, absorb impacts, and create unexpected defensive configurations. Lieutenant Chen's fingers danced across her interface, but she wasn't controlling the ships in any traditional sense. She was communicating with them, a complex dialogue of potential and response. Each vessel was part of a larger collective intelligence, learning and adapting in real time. A Zornak battleship launched what would have been a devastating energy weapon, a precise beam calculated to destroy multiple human vessels. But the human ships didn't just dodge. They transformed. The lead vessel's hull shifted, becoming a complex refractive surface that not only absorbed the energy, but redirected it back towards the attacking ship. Medical training teaches you something important about combat. Captain Williams explained to his bewildered junior officers. Every system has weak points. Every defense has a vulnerability. And the key is not to fight the system, but to understand its own internal logic. The battle became less a traditional space engagement and more a complex, three-dimensional dance. Human ships moved with an organic unpredictability that completely shattered Zornak tactical algorithms. They weren't just fighting. They were communicating through movement, through adaptation. One by one, Zornak ships found themselves outmaneuvered, their precise calculations rendered meaningless by humanity's fluid approach. What should have been a simple extermination became a humiliating defeat. As the first wave of Zornak ships retreated, Captain Williams allowed himself a small smile. The communication from the bridge was simple and would be broadcast across every human communication channel. We do not conform. We transform. The first battle was over, but the war was just beginning. Zara Meridian understood the power of a story long before she understood the power of technology. Born in a refugee camp, raised between cultures, she had witnessed firsthand how narratives could reshape reality. Now she was humanity's most potent weapon against the Zornak. Not a soldier, but a communication specialist whose battlefield was information itself. The United Earth Communication Strategic Division was unlike any military department in human history. Located in a converted data center in Nairobi, it was a global nerve center where linguists, psychologists, programmers, and cultural experts worked in perfect synchronization. Their mission was simple yet impossibly complex: transform humanity's resistance into a galactic message of hope. Zara's team developed communication algorithms that were living, breathing entities. These weren't just transmission protocols. They were adaptive neural networks designed to bypass alien communication barriers, to translate not just words, but the very essence of human resilience. We're not just sending messages, Zora explained to her team. We're sending a virus of hope. The first transmission went beyond traditional communication. They broadcast the entire first battle against the Zornak, not as a military record, but as a story. Every moment was contextualized, every tactical decision framed as an act of collective human creativity. They included personal stories of the crew, their backgrounds, their motivations. The Zornak were presented with something they could not comprehend: individuals who were simultaneously unique and part of a greater whole. But the psychological warfare went deeper. Zara's team began identifying and reaching out to species long oppressed by the Zornak. Each transmission was a carefully crafted invitation, not to war, but to possibility. On a distant mining colony, a species known as the Vrenak watched the human transmissions with growing fascination. For generations, they had been nothing more than resource extractors for the Zornak collective. Now, they saw something unprecedented: a species that fought not just with technology, but with imagination. The transmissions were multi-layered masterpieces. Technical data was woven with personal narratives, scientific discoveries with cultural insights. Each message carried multiple levels of communication, some designed for immediate understanding, others planted like seeds to germinate slowly in alien consciousness. One particularly brilliant transmission mapped the genetic diversity of human civilization. Where the Zornak saw weakness in human variation, Zara's team presented it as humanity's greatest strength. Each genetic variation was shown as an adaptive strategy, a testament to human resilience. Diversity is not a weakness, one transmission declared. It is our most powerful algorithm. Diplomatic channels were simultaneously opened. But these were not traditional negotiations. They were invitations, complex, multi-dimensional proposals that challenged the very foundation of the Zornak's hierarchical understanding. The oppressed species of the galaxy began to listen, and more importantly, they began to hope. Zara looked at her team, a quiet smile spreading across her face. The Zornak had made a fundamental miscalculation. They thought they were facing an enemy. They were actually facing the storyteller's greatest weapon, a narrative of unstoppable potential. Deep within a secure research facility carved into the Andes Mountains, a team of the most unconventional operatives in human history prepared for the most audacious mission ever conceived. The room was a controlled chaos of holographic displays, quantum computing arrays, and minds that refused to think in straight lines. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the center, her eyes reflecting the complex data streams that danced around her. Beside her, Jack Rice, a former black hat hacker turned quantum encryption specialist, manipulated impossible strings of code. To her right, Dr. Aisha Okoro, a cultural anthropologist with a doctorate in xenolinguistics, studied the intricate communication patterns of the Zornak collective. They're not just a civilization, Dr. Okoro explained, her fingers tracing complex linguistic patterns. They're a single, centralized organism. Every communication, every decision flows through a central nexus. The mission was deceptively simple, yet infinitely complex. Create a viral algorithm that was part code, part cultural intervention. This wasn't just about disabling systems. It was about challenging the fundamental philosophical foundations of an entire civilization. Jack Rice had spent months deconstructing intercepted Zornak communication protocols. What he discovered was both fascinating and terrifying. The Zornak's technological superiority was built on a paradoxically rigid framework, a centralized intelligence that prized efficiency over adaptation. They're mathematically perfect, Jack muttered, and that's their greatest weakness. The viral algorithm they were developing was a masterpiece of interdisciplinary innovation. It wasn't just a piece of code. It was a living system designed to do more than just infiltrate. It would learn, adapt, and most importantly, challenge. Dr. Rodriguez understood the deeper significance. "We're not creating a weapon," she told the team. "We're creating a mirror." The first phase involved creating a communication vector that could penetrate the Zornak's quantum communication network. This required breaking down their most fundamental communication protocols, a task that combined quantum physics, linguistic anthropology, and pure creative thinking. Dr. Okoro's contribution was particularly brilliant. She had mapped the Zornak's communication patterns like a linguistic ecosystem. Their language wasn't just a method of communication. It was a rigid framework that defined their entire perception of reality. "Every word is a mathematical equation," she explained. "They don't just communicate, they calculate." The viral algorithm would exploit this exact characteristic. It would enter their system not as an external threat, but as a seemingly perfect mathematical solution that would slowly unravel their entire conceptual framework. Jack's fingers danced across the quantum interface. Lines of code that looked like abstract art to the untrained eye were actually complex adaptive algorithms designed to propagate through the Zornak's central systems. "Ready?" Elena asked, her hand hovering over the final activation sequence. The team exchanged looks. This wasn't just a mission. This was humanity's most audacious act of technological judo, using the enemy's own strength against them. "We're ready," Jack responded. The activation was silent. No dramatic explosions, no visible effects, just a quiet insertion of possibility into a system that believed itself invulnerable. The Zornak would never see it coming. The unraveling began not with a bang, but with a whisper. Deep in the heart of Zornak Central Command, the first signs of systemic failure were so subtle that they were almost imperceptible. A quantum communication node flickered. A computational matrix hesitated for a millisecond. The most advanced artificial intelligence in the known galaxy experienced something it had never encountered before: uncertainty. Kravik, the highest-ranking Zornak strategic coordinator, first noticed the anomaly during a routine system diagnostic. His crystalline neural interface, which had always provided perfect, instantaneous information, suddenly produced fragmentary, contradictory data streams. "Impossible," he muttered, though muttering was a concept alien to his species. The viral algorithm introduced by the humans was a work of devastating brilliance. It didn't destroy the Zornak systems. It questioned them. Each line of code was a philosophical challenge, each transmission a subtle undermining of their fundamental belief systems. Where the Zornak saw absolute logic, the algorithm introduced nuance. Where they perceived perfect order, it demonstrated potential for chaos. Across the galaxy, subjugated species began to notice changes. Communication networks that had been tightly controlled started to show unexpected gaffes. Transmission frequencies that had always been monitored became unpredictable. On a mining colony in the Epsilon Quadrant, a species known as the Vreenak noticed something extraordinary. Their quantum communication restraints, devices that had controlled their movements for generations, began to malfunction. At first, it was just a momentary flicker of freedom. Then another. Then another. The human transmissions that had been slowly spreading across communication networks now took on new meaning. What had seemed like simple messages of hope now appeared to be precise, targeted communication designed to liberate. Kravik watched in growing horror as the Zornak Collective's perfect system began to fragment. Each attempt to reassert control created more complexity, more uncertainty. The viral algorithm was learning, adapting, growing more sophisticated with each interaction. What the humans had created was more than a technological weapon. It was a virus of possibility. Rebellions erupted across the Zornak Empire, not violent explosions, but something far more devastating. Systematic, coordinated acts of resistance that exploited every weakness in the centralized system. A mining colony would suddenly stop production. A communication network would go dark. A strategic outpost would simply stop responding. The Zornak had always believed in their absolute control. They had never considered the power of hope, the strength of collective potential. On Earth, Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched the galactic map, seeing the ripple effects of their mission. Each point of light represented a system breaking free, a civilization rediscovering its potential. "We didn't defeat them," she said softly to her team. "We showed them another way of existing." The Zornak Collective didn't fall in a moment of dramatic destruction. It simply dissolved, transformed by a single powerful idea that had been introduced through a brilliant adaptive algorithm. Possibility. The Galactic Conference Center on New Terra was unlike any diplomatic venue in history, floating above a planet that represented the true meaning of collaborative civilization. Representatives from hundreds of species gathered, not as conquerors, not as subjects, but as partners. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the center of this new world, watching as species that had been enemies for millennia found common ground. The Zornak, now transformed from a collective empire to a decentralized network of independent communities, sat alongside the species they had once oppressed, their crystalline forms no longer rigid with absolute certainty. The new galactic governance model was a masterpiece of adaptive cooperation. Traditional hierarchical structures had been replaced by a dynamic network of collaborative decision-making. Each species contributed its unique strengths, its particular way of perceiving and solving challenges. Aria Chen, now leading the Galactic Innovation Institute, presented the foundational principles. "We are not building an empire," she explained, her holographic presentation dancing with complex, interconnected patterns. "We are creating an ecosystem of potential." The educational systems developed in the aftermath of the conflict were revolutionary. Schools across different planets now focused on core principles that transcended individual species limitations. Adaptive thinking, collaborative problem-solving, empathetic communication, systemic creativity. Dr. Kwame Osei, who had been instrumental in humanity's initial resistance, now led the interspecies cultural exchange program. "Our greatest weapon," he often said, "was never our technology. It was our ability to see potential where others saw only limitations." The technological advances that emerged from this new collaborative approach were staggering. Quantum communication networks that allowed instantaneous understanding across different biological and technological frameworks. Adaptive environmental restoration technologies that could heal planets devastated by centuries of conflict. Medical innovations that could bridge the vast biological differences between species. But the most profound change was philosophical. The rigid determinism that had defined the Zornak Collective and many other galactic civilizations had been replaced by a more fluid understanding of existence. Potential was no longer seen as a fixed concept, but as a continuously evolving ecosystem of possibility. Zora Meridian, now the primary diplomatic strategist, reflected on the journey. "We didn't win a war," she told a group of young scholars from various species. "We started a conversation that had never happened before." The final memorial to the conflict was not a monument of victory, but a living museum. Located on the former site of the first human Zornak encounter, it was an interactive space that told the story of transformation. Visitors could experience the moment of first contact, the challenges of resistance, the breakthrough of understanding. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, now in her 60s, looked out over the diverse gathering. Species that had once been locked in perpetual conflict now worked together on challenges that would have seemed impossible decades ago. "The final frontier," she said softly, knowing her words would be translated and understood by every being present, was never about conquering space. It was about understanding our collective potential. As the sun set on New Terra, casting its light on representatives from across the galaxy, it was clear that humanity's greatest victory was not in defeating an enemy, but in reimagining what was possible.